Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this 3-stranded macrame bracelet. And this is what it looks like. So you have your 3 separate strands here going all the way around, but then they're connected at the ends with some macrame. And then obviously this is just the pattern that I've chosen to do, but you can do it in a different way. And when you're wearing it, it kind of looks like you're wearing a wraparound bracelet, but it's all connected and nice and secure. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. And these are the things that we're going to need. Now first off, we'll need our cord. In this case I'm just working with a black s-lon cord, and this is about a 0.4mm in thickness, but you can really use any different kind of cord that you already have. And then up here I have some ribbon ends, and these are 20mm in size, and I'm just going to be using these to finish off my bracelet at the end. And then the beads that I'm going to be using are these. Now these are some hematite gemstone beads. They're 4mm in size, they're rounds but they're also faceted. So they have a lovely, nice, beautiful sparkle to them. And these beads specifically were some of the ones that Panda Hall kindly sent to me. And I'll put a link to their website in the description box if you want to have a look at that. But they are some really beautiful beads. And as you can see, they've got a nice weight to them because they're hematite. That's what I really like about hematite as well. It's one of my favourite gemstones to work with, but because of the faceting on them and then the gold colour, they have a beautiful sparkle to them. So I think that'll look really nice in a bracelet, especially because you're moving it and then it'll catch the light as you move it. So these are the beads that I'm going to be using. So let's get all the materials together and then let's get started. Now the first thing that we need to do is we need to cut all our cords ready, and I'm using 6 lengths of 2 meters each. So we need these, and then I'm also going to have just a little piece of spare cord. This doesn't need to be very long, this is just to hold the cords in the beginning. So it's just a little bit of extra cord as well. And then in this case I'm just going to be working on my mini macrame board here. And now this is just for easiness for me, I find it easy to work on. If you have something else, if you don't have this, you can just use whatever you have. Another board and some pins, so you can really use many different things. I'm just going to be working on this. And then what I'm just going to do to begin with is get that spare piece of cord that I said to cut just a short length, and I'm just going to be putting this onto my macrame board. So this is the cord that we're going to use to attach all the others to. So this is literally just to start off the piece. So I'm just using the slots on the side to attach it so it sits nice and securely. And like I said, you can use other things. If you're using something else, a board and some pins, just pin it down to your board like this so it sits nice and securely, and we can now use this to attach the other cords with. So to do that, you want to then get your other cords and take one length at a time, so the ones that you cut the long lengths, and then I'm going to fold them together at the end here. So with both ends they come together like this, and then up here the other end where I have a loop, that's roughly the middle of the cord. And that's what we're going to be using, because we're going to attach these long cords to that base one that I said, using the lax head knot. And now if you're unsure about some basic macrame knots, I do have a video on how to do them that might be helpful for you, so I'm going to link that in the description box and you can have a look at that. But what I'm going to do is take this cord that I'm folding in half, and then where I have the loop here is about half, I'm going to put that from the underneath here, so coming from the bottom, and they go underneath the cord that's attached to my board like this, and then we have the loop at the top, and then put your fingers through, grab your ends and pull them all the way through your loop like that. So you now have something that looks roughly like this, a bit like a pretzel shape, and then when you tighten that, that's going to sit there on your cord now and be attached. And that is your lax head knot. But what I'm just going to do is I'm also going to do a half hitch on each side, because we need that extra spacing with the knots. So what you'll find is where your cords are coming out here, they're each kind of coming out to their own side. You just want to stick to that side. So I'll take one side first, do my left one first, grab that end, come back over the top of your base cord here, and then pull it back underneath. And then you pull it out and make sure it comes up through the loop on the bottom here of the same cord, so like this. So you're looping around the base cord but then coming back through the loop, and then you tighten that, and then that half hitch is going to sit on that side of your lax head knot. And then you do the same on the other side. Come back around the top. And then back underneath. And then pull up through the loop. Like so. And tighten it. And there, your cord is now completely attached. And you have a lax head knot with a double half hitch on each side. And then while you're attaching the other ones, you can just push that to the side to get it out of the way. And then you want to grab your next length of cord, do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to show you again up close. So find the middle here, put your ends together, and then here with the loop is the middle. Put the loop underneath the cord on your board, and then your fingers through that loop from the back, and then go through and grab the ends and pull them all the way through. So it looks like this, kind of that pretzel shape. Pull it tight, and there you have your lax head knot. Separate out your ends here to each their own side, just where they're naturally coming out. Do one side at a time, grab your end, go back over your base cord, and then put it underneath, and then pull it back up through the loop that you created with that same cord, like this. So it's coming through your loop as well. Tighten that on this side. So that's your half hitch on the one side of your lax head knot. Do the same thing with the other one. Up, back underneath, and up through the loop. Like so. And then tighten that. And then there you have your second cord attached. So that's now two. And you just want to go through and attach the rest of your cords as well. So I've now attached all my lengths of cord, like you can see here. And then what we're going to do now is just create a little piece of macrame here at the beginning, so we can use that to attach the ribbon ends at the end. And the way that I do that is I'm going to go to my left side here and then grab the very first cord. Now you can also easily start on the other side, that's completely up to you. I'm just going to do it this way. It's going to be the same result. You're just going to be doing it opposite, but you'll be going back and forth from one side to the other and then back again anyway, so it doesn't matter what side you start from. But I'm just going to take my furthest left cord, and then what I'm going to do is put that over all the rest, and then the very next one that's coming underneath, so all the rest are coming underneath. So the one I put over is my holding cord, and the rest are going to be my working cords. So I'm going to hold this with my right hand, and then the other one next one that's coming underneath, make sure to grab the very next one every time so you don't cross them over. I'm going to put that around my finger like this, and then pull back through the loop, and then you'll get a bit of a 6 forming and looping around your holding cord. And then what you need to do is tighten this, but you need to make sure your holding cord, you're going to be forming a row of knots that's going to be straight underneath the row where you attached your cords. So you need to make sure that this row is as straight as possible. So what you do is the holding cord, you kind of hold it up a little bit like that. And then we'll be doing double half hitches, so I'm doing it again around my finger and back through the loop. Like so. And as you can see, I'm holding it just up a little bit at an angle, and that's going to make this row underneath nice and tight to the first one that we have. And then moving on to the next cord. So like I said, the very next one every time you grab one. Continue to use this as your holding cord around your finger and back through the loop. So you get your 6 like that. And then when you tighten it, hold your cords at just a bit of an angle. And again, to get the double half hitch around your finger and through the loop. Like that. And you just continue doing this all the way across until you reach the end. So I've now kept going all the way to the end, doing the exact same thing, doing with double half hitches. And then what we have here now is the holding cords coming out at this end. So what we need to do now is move back the other way, because we need to create a few rows underneath each other to create that little bit of space with just macrame. So what I'm going to do is take the same holding cord, and this holding cord is going to be the holding cord throughout this next row as well. And we just want to change direction. So go back the other way, above all the other cords like that. And then you just grab the very first one of the working cords that you meet now. So the very last one you just used in that row, you just use that as the first one in this row. And then you just do the same thing, just with opposite hands. So I go around my finger and back through the loop, and then tighten that, and this is going to be the first knot on this row. And remember, still you want this row as straight as possible. So just hold your holding cord a bit at an angle like that, around your finger and through the loop, to create your double half hitch, like so. And that's the beginning of the next row. Grab your very next cord, around your finger and through the loop, like that. One more time for your double half hitch, and there you have the beginning of your very next row. Just again move all the way to the other end, finish up this row, and then you just want to do this a few times. However many rows you do is up to you really, but I'm just going to do a few more so I have enough to use this macrame part to finish the bracelet with the ribbon ends at the end. So that's really the main purpose of this. So I've now continued making my rows of macrame knots, and I'm happy with the amount that I have. It's going to suit my ribbon end nicely, and I've ended up with a total of 7 rows, and that includes the very first one where we attach the cords. So if you want to look at it, the first row you attach your cords, and then after that I've made another 6 rows. So going back and forth from one side to the other 6 times. And in total that's given me 7 rows. So now what we need to do is start working on the section that's going to be the main part of our bracelet, and also the part where we're adding in the beads. And then what you'll find is, because of the amount of cords that we used, that we attached in the beginning, what we're going to do is we're basically going to be doing 3 separate sections, because this is kind of called a 3-strand macrame bracelet, and in each section we'll be using 4 lengths of our cord. So we're going to have 1 to each side and then 1 in the middle, and each section of them have 4 cords in them. So each of these sections are going to be a little bit different from each other, so we're going to be using a couple of different knots, but it's still just the basic macrame knots. Now in the middle section here I'm going to be using the basic square knot, so that's the one I'm going to be using throughout, and then adding beads to it as I go. And then on both the 2 outside sections I'm going to be using the spiral knot, but going in different directions, and again also adding the beads as I go. So first I just want to start off all my sections before I start adding any beads, and to do that I'm just going to grab one section at a time. I'm just going to start with the middle one, because this is the one we're using the square knot, so this is the one that stands out for itself. And what I'm going to do is, in this case, I'm going to have the two middle cords in this section are going to be my holding cords, and they're going to also be the ones we're adding the beads to when we start doing that. So I'm just going to put them at the bottom of my board in a slot to get them kind of nice and taut, so I can make knots around them. And then just put the others out of the way. I'm just going to then do a square knot here, and it doesn't matter what side you start with, that's completely up to you. I'm going to put my left one over like this, and then take the other one, so the right one, put that over the one we just put over the holding cord, and then back underneath the middle here, so crossing under everything in the middle, and then up through the loop on the other side. So you have this looping around your 2 holding cords in the middle. And again, this is a basic macrame knot, which will also be included in the video that I have for basic macrame knots, if you're not quite sure how to do this. So tighten that all the way up, and then to finish off the square knot we need to start from the other side like that, and do the same thing but then the other way around, up through the loop, and then tighten that. And that's our first full square knot, and we've just started off this section now. So now to move on to the side sections, and just take this off of the board again and then put them to the side. So you can just kind of hold your sections separate from each other to help keep your cords organised. I'm just going to start on my left side here, and again same principle, the 2 middle cords are the holding cords. So I'm just going to attach them to the bottom of my board here to keep them nice and taut to make knots around. And then here I'm going to be doing the spiral knot, and this is the same principle really as the square knot. We're just not going to be going on both sides, we stay to one side the whole time. And in this case I'm going to start with my left side, so on my left side of my bracelet I'm going to be starting on my left side, You can obviously do it opposite if you want to. This is just the look that I want to achieve. And then do the first half of the square knot just like I showed you before. So put that over, then the one from the other side over that, and then underneath everything in the middle, and then bring it up through the loop, like so, and tighten it. And then instead of starting from the other side, we're going to keep going from the same side, like this. Start with the same cord every time you do a new knot, and that's how you then achieve the spiral knot. And I'm just going to do 2 to begin with, like that, because that equals the same spacing we did with the square knot. So basically, one full square knot is 2 individual knots. That forms a square knot, and the same on here, you have 2 individual knots to form the first part of your spiral knot, like that. And move to the other side, release these cords, and then start off the last section here. So again, take the 2 middle cords, that's going to be the holding cords throughout this section, attach them to the bottom, get everything else out of the way, and then do your spiral knot on this side. And on this right side I'm going to start from the other side, so I'm going to do my right cord, bring over first, and then take my left cord and finish that knot. And this is just my preference. You can obviously do it differently if you want to. And then tighten that. And then do the same again, starting from the same side, so from the right side in this case. And then bring the other one over and underneath everything and up through the loop. And tighten it. And there we've started off this section as well. So we've now started off all our sections with one full knot on each, just to get an even spacing throughout all of them. So what I'm going to do now is start adding in the beads to my outside sections, because what I want to do as well is the beads be off center from each other. So I'm just going to add the beads to my outside sections first. So in this case, I put my bead onto the 2 middle cords, so the holding cords of that section. Just going to put this to the side. You can see it better there. And then push it all the way up like you would do normally to sit underneath the knots that you've already done. And then what we're just going to do is continue. So I'm just going to take the holding cords here and attach them back into the board to give them a bit of tension so I can keep knotting around them. And then on this side, what we did, on my left side of the bracelet, I start with my left cord. So that's just an easy way to remember, just to make sure you keep doing the same way. And I'm going to continue with my spiral knot on this side. So stick with the same cord you start with every time, like that. So that's caged in that bead now. And just do one more. Always do the two knots basically to be equal to one full square knot, so you get the sizing and the amount right, like that. And that's caged in that bead. And what you'll find with the spiral knot is that your working cords will start moving, and eventually you'll have to just swap them around, but then just do that as you go whenever you feel like it's time. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So again, just leave the middle section for now. And then on this side, I'm just going to again attach my bead to the 2 middle ones, so the holding cords, push all the way up, and then on this side, remember you start from the other side, the cord that comes to the right. And then you just attach your first 2 beads like this. So I've now added a bead to each of the sides, just like I explained to you. And then now what I'm going to do is move to the middle. And also remember that I've caged in the bead with one knot, or two of the individual spiral knots, but equaling one square knot underneath it. And then I'm just going to move to the middle here and secure my 2 holding cords to the bottom, just to give them a nice tension here. And then I'm going to do a few more knots before I start adding in the beads here, because like I explained, I want my beads to kind of be off center from each other to give a little bit of patterning like that. And I'm just going to continue. So the square knots, like I said, you can start from either side, it doesn't matter. I just start from my left side. Now I've already done one at the beginning, just like I did on all of them. Just kind of forget about that and just continue from here. And then what I'm going to do is count my knots as I go, because I want to kind of get an even look throughout the whole piece. So that's 1. And then 2, like this. And then this pretty much is now gotten to the level of right below the beads. So that's why I just want to know that. So now I know 2 of my square knots equal my beads. So I'm just going to remember that. So every time I add a bead to the outside, I'm going to do equal 2 square knots in the middle. And then now what I'm going to do is continue some square knots here, because now I'm going to get to the point where I want to add in the bead in this middle section. And how many knots you want in between is really up to you. I'm just going to show you what I do. So again, I'm going to count my knots from this point, because these knots end where the beads are. So I want to know how many knots I have in between each bead on each section. So that's 1. So I've now actually ended up making 3 square knots here. And then what I'm going to do is add a bead to this section, the middle one, because now I know I want 3 of my square knots, so the equivalent to that on the other sides as well, in between my side beads and my middle beads. So I know that I'm going to be using 3, but like I said, you can quite easily do a few more, and just if you want it even looking, just use them throughout the whole bracelet. This is just what I'm going to be doing. So again, I'm going to then release my holding cords in the middle section here, and then put a bead on both of those cords, and then push it all the way up like that, so it sits right underneath your previous knots. I'm going to reattach this just to get the tension again, and then just cage this bead in. Continue doing the same square knots, and then while we're at it, because now I know I've decided how many knots I want in between my beads, I'm just going to continue. So that's 1 now. I know I want 3, so I'm just going to do another 2, so I have the same amount on this side as I do on the other side. So I've now done my 3 square knots underneath that bead in the middle section here. So what I'm going to do is move on back to the sides. And once you figure out what pattern you want, you can just do 1 full section at a time if you want to. Or you can do it like this to make sure that it gets even throughout the whole piece. That's completely up to you. But then just put that middle section to the side, go back to one of the side ones, and then we just want to continue these. So I'm going to take my 2 holding cords in the middle, attach them to my board again, or whatever you're working on, to get the tension right, and then I'm going to keep doing my spiral knots on the sides here. And then on this side, remember, we start with the left one, so you just want to keep starting with the same cord throughout. And remember, now we need to remember the amount of knots that we're doing as well. So in this case, like I explained at the beginning, 1 knot on your spiral knots is half a square knot. So we need to do 2 of our spiral knots to equal the size of a square knot. And in this case, I decided on having 3 square knots in between each bead. So what I'm going to do is, we already have 1, remember that we caged in the bead with. So we do another 2. And that means another 4 spiral knots technically. And as you can see, it's spiraling now, so I'm going to have to switch up my cords. So the right one I just put underneath my 2 holding cords, bring it over to the other side, and the other one I just bring over to the other side like this. And I just continue. It's just to get my cords into position to be able to keep working with them. But I keep starting with the same side. So that's 1 full one, another full one, so now we have 2. And then we need the 3rd one as well. And you can really see the spiral going now, like that. So that's equal now to our 3 square knots. So now where we've reached is a position where we're right next to the bead in the middle. And if you remember up here, what we did was we made some square knots in the middle section where we have our beads on the outside. We want to do the same on the sides. So that means on here, we know that the beads equal 2 square knots. That means we need to make 4 spiral knots to equal the size of the bead. So I'm just going to continue doing that. So I've now made them so they're equal to the size of the bead, and then we need to move on again to get into a position where we're going to add a next bead to this outside section. So again, just like the other times, I know that's equal. The pattern that I'm using is 3 square knots, so I need to make the 6 spiral knots on here, just like I did just previously after the last bead. So this, if you want your bracelet nice and even in the pattern, then you can just kind of keep count like this. But like I said, you don't have to use this exact same amount of knots. You can do more or less in between your beads. That's completely up to you. So I've now made the full amount of knots that I know that I need here before I'm in position to add my next bead. And then what you can do as well, if you find that you're counting the knots doesn't quite add up to the right spacing, you can always add in an extra knot here and there. Like if you found this was a bit too short to reach the same distance, even though you counted them, just add in enough knots for you to reach the same space. So you can just adjust it like that as you go as well. And then now that we reached that, then obviously you can release it. Your holding cords, add on another bead there, and then cage that in. But then otherwise you need to move to the other side and do the same. So we're just going to take the middle out of the way, and then on this side, just like the other times, put your holding cords in place, and then you just want to keep doing your spiral knots here. And you want to basically replicate now the other side here. So now if you know how many knots you've done on this side, you can just do the same amount on this side to make sure they get down to the same place before adding in the beads on both sides. So I've now done the other side as well with my spiral knot, and I reached the point where on both sides I'm going to push up my bead on the 2 holding cords like that, do the same on the other side, and then just cage them in, just like you were doing previously, like that. So it sits in place there nice and secure, and then you just continue, do that on both sides if you want to, and then reach the middle here, go back to that, and then get to a point where you continue doing the amount of knots. You've now reached the beads on the outside, so that means you need the 2 square knots to equal the size of the bead, and then after that you have 3 square knots like we just did in this section, and then you add a bead to the middle section. But once you've done a little bit here, you can kind of just count how many knots you have in between each bead on each section, and that'll make it a lot easier. Once you know that, you can just count your knots and do a full section at a time if you want to, or even a bit more than just adding a bit at a time like I'm doing now. But that's really up to you, because you can use different amount of knots as well. But just count them as you go, and then it'll make it easier and quicker to do once you do that. But otherwise you just continue doing this until you reach the length, roughly the length that you need your bracelet to be. Obviously we need to do this section as well at the end, so account for that space, and then also whatever clasp that you want to add as well. But roughly so you have almost the length that you need your bracelet to be. So I've now kept working my way all the way down, adding my beads as I go, until I reach the bottom here when I feel like it's going to be long enough. And then what I've made sure of is to basically finish it the same way that we started. So finish it in the middle, on the middle section in the middle where you would add a bead in between, and here right after you add your beads. And that's going to be pretty much the same as in the beginning. So now what we need to do is connect this end together, also the same way that we did in the beginning. So to do that, again, we're just going to create the rows of knots with just the macrame, just like we have in the beginning, to make it even. And the way you do that is just start from one side. You can start from the right or the left, it doesn't matter. In this case I'm just going to start from the other side, just to change it up a little bit. And then what you can do as well, because as you can see these are loose, it can be quite beneficial to use pins with this. But what you want to do is take the cord furthest to the right if you start on the right side, or furthest to the left if you start on the other side. And then just in the same way as the beginning, bring this over all the others. And then that's going to be a holding cord throughout all of your rows. And then you take the very next one, very next cord. So this is one of your holding cords from that same section. And just do a double half hitch around your holding cord. tighten it. So you tighten it all the way underneath where your section ends. One more to do the double half hitch. Like so. Move on to the next one. Just going to pin this back in to keep it secure a little bit. Next cord. This is the other holding cord. And then make sure when you pull your knots tight, that your holding cord, again just like in the beginning, hold it up a little bit at an angle, and that's going to give you that straight line going across all the way here. Like that. And the last one in this section. Double half hitch, just like the other times. So that's the first section. Moving on to the next section, because we need to attach them together so it's one solid piece like in the beginning. And you just take the very first one, in this case it'll be a working cord from that section, and just continue doing your double half hitch. Tighten it, and then that'll bring the two sections together and it'll end up looking like the beginning. Like so. So you just continue like that all the way across and do the same amount of rows back and forth as you did in the beginning, and then that'll be the ending of your bracelet, and then I'll show you how we finish it off. So I've now finished off my rows at the bottom here, and then we can take it off the board or whatever you've been using, as we're basically done with the macrame now. Now all there's left to do is finish off the ends so we can turn it into a bracelet, and then all that's left to do now is finish off the ends. So that's both ends. Here we only have the side ones, but down here we have all the excess cord we have. So what I'm going to use for that is a bit of glue, and for this I specifically like to use GS Hypo Cement, and because it dries clear and it's a really strong glue, but even more specifically because it has a very fine nozzle tip to it, so I can really get the glue just right where I want it to go and not get it all over the place. So I just go along the edge here where my cords are coming out and just put glue along there, just a little bit, you don't need to put too much, and then along the back as well, just so we can cut off the ends right close to where they're coming out. So I've now finished off both ends here and we have no excess cord left, and then all that's left to do is use your ribbon ends to attach to both ends, and then you use these loops to attach whatever clasp you want. So some jump rings, and then say a lobster claw clasp and extended chain. I have a video on how to use these, so I'm going to link that in the description box. That's how to finish off kumihimo braids, the flat ones, but it's the same principle. So if you need to have a look at that, look in the description box. Otherwise, then this is your finished bracelet once you add your ends and your clasp. So I really hope that you enjoyed this, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this macrame bracelet. And this is what it looks like. So we're going to use a technique that's a bit of a variation of the square knot and incorporating beads into it. So it's almost a bit like a double row with your beads running down side by side.